Southwark Council YouTube channel via the Zoom platform, and a recording of the meeting will be viewable on YouTube after the meeting has ended. May I remind members to raise your hand if you wish to speak, and please wait until I've given you permission to speak before contributing. Members of the public are welcome to record, screenshot or post the public proceedings of the meeting, and a copy of the Council's protocol for reporting and filming is available on the Southwark website. Okay, so we'll get started on the agenda. We've got a couple of apologies for absence this evening. So Councillor Hamish McCallum sends apologies. Welcome Councillor Bentley as reserve in his place this evening. And Councillor Sabina Emanuel has also sent apologies for this evening. Are there any other apologies that anyone's aware of? Nope. Okay. We'll move on to confirmation of voting members. So please can voting members present in the room and the Scrutiny Project Manager please introduce yourselves. So I'm Councillor Esme Hicks, I'm the Chair.
Councillor Graham Newell, Vice Chair.
Councillor Rachel Bentley, as you say, a reserve for Councillor McCallum.
Councillor David Parton, Ordinary Member.
Councillor Leo Pollack.
Julie Timbrell, Project Manager for the Commission. Can I just remind people to, if you're using a mobile phone, to try and keep it away from the speakers or turn it on aeroplane mode. That also works.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, everyone. So we'll move on to notification of any items of business which the Chair deems urgent. I've not received notification of any urgent items this evening. On to disclosure of interests and dispensations. Does any member wish to declare any interests or dispensations in respect of any item of business to be considered at this meeting? No, I'm seeing shaking heads. Lovely. On to the minutes from the last meeting. So can I ask, is the meeting happy to judge the minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of November 2025 as an accurate record of that meeting? Agreed. Lovely, thank you. Okay, so that takes us on to the first substantive item, which is a community safety report. So this item has been requested to address phone snatching, particularly by individuals using electric bikes, to include how CCTV can be used as one tool amongst other interventions to address this issue. And we have a broad report on robbery and two-wheel enabled theft in the borough, which we've had as part of the pre-reading the papers for this meeting. Please could I invite police to join us, and with assistance from the community safety team from the council, who'll be able to cover some of the partnership work on this. Thank you very much for joining us. Could I ask you to please introduce yourselves first of all, and then just give a short summary of the report, and then we'll move on to questions. Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Councillor Ennin and I'm the Cabinet Member for Community Safety and Neighbourhoods. For me, the report is something that I would like the Met to speak to specifically in regards to the action that they're taking. It's been a big request for our residents that we address phone theft in the area. I've attended a robbery group that was held by, at that time, Vanessa, was it Vanessa Bellamy? Was it Vanessa? I attended a robbery group where I raised my concerns about the lack of arrest in this area, and some of the challenges were put to me that the Met are facing, specifically around the Child First report strategy, where a number of these crimes are being committed by young people. I know that a lot of work has been taking place with our Youth Justice Service, specifically around what work we can do to deter young people from getting involved in phone snatches specifically. And most recently, I've visited Croydon, that has a public space protection order against two-wheeled enabled thefts. But for the most part, I'd like the Met to speak to the actions that they're taking. Thank you.
Thank you. If we could continue with introductions and then we'll move on to the report. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Karen Thwaites. I'm the Assistant Director for Community Safety and Partnerships for the Council.
Thank you.
Apologise if I forgot myself. My name is Alid Richards, the Strategic Director for Environment, Sustainability and Leisure.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jim Brockway. I'm the Superintendent and the Neighbourhood Lead for Southwark.
Lovely, thank you. If you wouldn't mind speaking to the report, thank you.
Yeah, so thank you. So if I'll take this one first, and then maybe Jim would like to come in first. So you've seen the report that's been submitted. Obviously, we recognise that robbery, personal robbery, and two-wheeled enabled crime is a problem for the borough. Although we are seeing decreases in personal robbery, and we are also seeing decreases in our knife crime. We're also seeing increases in our positive outcomes for offenders that are apprehended and dealt with through obviously the court systems. It's a issue that's being seen across the whole of the Met, and actually we've doing a lot of work in that area. We've increased our neighbourhood policing teams, so we now have a policing team in North Woolworth, which is Elephant and Castle. We also have a neighbourhood policing team in Peckham, and those increases in numbers in those teams and in that neighbourhood policing space, so that we are looking to have more officers on the streets in these spaces with high crime areas to address this issue. We're also from across the BCU, because obviously we don't just have neighbourhood officers, we have other officers across the borough that are looking at this issue as well. And with our local investigations, again, we're looking at utilising our resources in those hotspot areas. I've also this week spoken with the BCU commander for Westminster, Charing Cross, because I recognise that this issue is not just the criminals don't see boundary boroughs like we do, so it's a crime issue. So we're looking at a wider policing plan that will cover that Westminster Bridge up through that SE1 corridor, which brings us up through the Elephant and Castle and to London Bridge, and looking at utilising wider Met policing resources, so interceptors, use of live facial recognition and additional policing resource, so that we can maximise opportunities to address this crime issue. And those are things that are in place at the moment. So it is high harm offending is one of our BCU priorities, and so it is very much on our radar, and we are very much focusing on this issue. Jim, is there anything that you'd like to add? And the only other thing, sorry, before I bring Jim in, is obviously we've got hexagons, which have been identified by the Home Office, which are areas that have been identified as high crime areas. We have one of those at Elephant and Castle, and as a result of that, we get extra resourcing from the Home Office to police those areas. So again, that's additional policing resource that we are able to utilise in those areas that have been identified as the Home Office for high crime areas. Jim.
So just to pick up that particular bit, and just as an extra bit of clarity, the North Woolworth team is within our Operation Martello area. Martello is identified by the Home Office as Mum has just said, but it's just important to highlight that those are additional officers on top of neighbourhood teams. So they've always had neighbourhood teams in and around the Elephant and Castle, they've always had neighbourhood teams in and around Peckham, but this is an additional layer of officers that sit over and above those well-established teams. So Peckham is more of a town centre team. We are calling Elephant and Castle a town centre team, although it probably doesn't fit perhaps the traditional model. But the opportunities that Martello are presenting us are really exciting. There's really good work going with my colleagues from Caroline's team, which are looking at a variety of measures around, in particular, focus on knife crime, two-wheeled enabled crime, to try and target harden some of those issues away. It's really tricky. No one's ever going to say to you it's not. It's a really difficult crime type to deal with. If anybody's ever been unfortunate enough here to be a victim of that type of crime, you will be able to see how quickly those offenders arrive and how quickly they depart, and no one is ever going to say to you that it's not a really difficult type of crime to prevent and detect. But we are fortunate in the BCU around the additional asset that we get. If we focus on two-wheeled enabled crime, your normal officers who come and deal with a 999 call, they're going to find that really difficult to deal with. But certainly the interceptors and the task force, the additionality that we do get, do give us that opportunity. and we're well versed with the representations which we make to get that additional asset come and join to us. It's not without its cost for us, if you like, as a borough, because our investigators would need to wrap round and support the additional officers who come in and deal with that. But they certainly are result driven. Sometimes it can feel like a small result against an awful lot of crimes which take place, but certainly it does prove to be a deterrent. But I would never look to hide that from any of you, that it's a really tricky crime type to be able to deal with.
Thank you very much for that summary. Is there anything else anyone would like to add before we move to questions? No?
Yeah, just to reinforce what Emma and Jim were saying, clearly a kind of a real priority on the borough. Obviously work very closely with police and partners. CCTV, I know it's something you wanted to look at in particular. We've been involved in operations like Operation Devilla, where we're working closely, the CCTV operators are working closely with police in terms of that early suspect identification. We're doing a huge amount of work, and I know there's a sample in the briefing note this evening around publicising and crime prevention. We're doing a huge amount on our council digital channels. I still think despite that uptick, you can never do enough. You'll go out this evening on Tooley Street and there'll still be people on their phones. It's a constant kind of drive from a communications perspective, and a lot more work to be done still in relation to that behavioural change piece. But Southwark isn't unique in any way whatsoever. And last but not least, just in terms of the high visibility patrols, we've got our community wardens and also our nighttime patrolling service, working alongside police colleagues in those kind of hotspot areas to provide that deterrent and reassurance. Still, notwithstanding the point that Jim made earlier about the operational tactics and this being still very much a challenging issue due to the operating models of these criminals.
Thank you.
No, I was going to ask Caroline to speak a bit more about the robbery group and the work that... Who was that?
I think we've got Alice online. So.
You want to go in quickly? I think what Councillor Ellen is alluding to is just in terms of how we work with police and partnership colleagues. We have weekly briefings, we have monthly briefing and tasking processes, the purpose of which is to get a real rich picture of what's happening on the borough, not just in terms of, I suppose, the here and now, but also the forward-looking, and actually where best to deploy our resources. As the Borough Commander identified in terms of moving forward, there's a lot more cross-borough work because these criminals, they know no geographical boundaries. So I think the point that I just want to reinforce is that joint partnership tasking of resources and really understanding the problem, but also getting ahead, bearing in mind some of the techniques that these criminals are using. They're progressing, and it's about effectively keeping up with those and responding accordingly.
Thank you. Very helpful overview. We'll move to questions. If you wouldn't mind, I've got just one to start with. So one of the things that was, albeit Borough Commander, you mentioned outcomes are getting better on this. There weren't any stats in the report around arrests and convictions around this sort of crime. I wondered if you could shed any light on that or add any richness.
Sorry, we can share those with you. Yeah, we can send those in if that's okay.
That would be very helpful. Do you have anything off the top of your head in terms of what the latest figures are or stats for that?
It's quite a difficult one to quantify because unfortunately it can take an awful long time before certainly convictions at court work their way through. So trying to work that through to any type of timescale to give you certainly an overview geographically is really tricky. The data isn't particularly designed that way. It would give you an overview of, we could provide overviews of arrests and detections for a borough. It doesn't really give you a breakdown for your particular problem area, which is outside effectively. So it's quite a difficult way to work that out specifically for the London Bridge area.
And also, I think just what worth noting, the crime types. So what you would recognise as there's the difference between the phone snatch and which is the phone theft, or a robbery, the robbery with a knife, and we don't count the two wheeled enabled would be dependent on what that crime type is. So sometimes it's difficult to break down, but we can get something to you.
I'd appreciate that, thank you. It'd be good. It was the one area which it wasn't addressed in the report, so it'd be helpful to understand that in terms of stats. Thank you. I'll go to hands. So I saw Rachel first, and then come over to Leo.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions. The first one, you obviously talked about Elephant and Castle and Peckham, but you've alluded to London Bridge being a hotspot, and I think we see them when we're going home. So we have a lot of visitors to the area, tourists, people who don't necessarily have English as a first language, aren't kind of on next door every day, seeing all these kind of things. So I was wondering kind of how closely you're working with TfL, Network Rail, those providers on kind of messaging and also kind of maybe signage that is universal, because I think so many people come out of those and they're looking at their phone, where am I going, using it as navigation. And then the second point is around links to organised crime. Obviously this isn't just hijinks, somebody gets up one day and thinks, oh, I'm going to whiz around and steal a phone. And these illegal souped up bikes, which we then know, we had the fire brigade here a few months ago, all the problems with those exploding. And so linking it to gangs and grooming young people and kind of understanding just how, if you arrest one person, is that kind of then linking to a broader network that we need to be concerned about, say, beyond just the theft, to what that's doing to our young people in the borough. Does that make sense? Two questions.
Yeah, so the TfL is probably widely linked into British Transport Police. Regularly we have operations with British Transport Police. I mean, London Bridge is a really vibrant transport hub, so we are regularly linked into them. They do a look up, look out campaign, of which we have amplified before, and that will continue. Our links there are really good. I'm just about to lose one of my best policemen to them, actually. He's going to go and work for BTP, unfortunately. Organisationally, we do... there are elements of organised crime which do operate, certainly within the phone theft area. There are some well-publicised cases which took place probably just before Christmas, which you may have seen within the news, not on this borough, but certainly within the Met. We would certainly look to take any opportunities that presented itself locally for that. Certainly where some of our stolen phones are ended up, we would actively look at and have actively looked at. And I would certainly encourage our cops to do it again should those opportunities arise.
So just coming back on the first point, as a regular user of public transport, I don't feel like I'm surrounded by warnings about this. Now, I don't come out of London Bridge Station with my phone in my hand. So how proactive do you feel that is? Is there more that could be done, not just with the British Transport Police, but with kind of broader messaging?
There's obviously always more that can be done. I mean, so for me individually, I know, I accept it. I guess it's a perception thing. I have noticed those warnings myself. I actually noticed one as an announcement on a train as I came across this week. So I do think that they're there. I do think that obviously there's always more that can be done. Nobody would ever say that. We're looking to so the Met Engage system is our current way of which we are looking to engage with members of the public. I could certainly take that away and we can look and see what we can get through the Met Engage system. We've done it previously before, but I'm certainly not adverse to doing it again moving forward.
And if I can just come in on the vulnerability piece, so in relation to some of the offenders that we arrest, we do look at that vulnerability piece and to identify if there is any, so we take a child first approach to young people in custody and then look at whether there are any gang links and anything that we can do to sort of looking at that exploitation piece to make sure that they're properly safeguarded and supported, and we work closely alongside the local authority to do that.
Councillor Ennis?
Thank you. I think that's a really, really good question, and it's something that through the Southwark Violence Reduction Unit has been taken quite seriously. So in London Bridge in particular, there's been stenciling on the floor, there's been intensive resident engagement around Bermondsey Street, and if you go in key locations along Tooley Street as well as down in Berman Street, you'll see the lookout sign. One of the things that we've tried to do more than anything is making sure we're publicising this material to different communities. So when it goes into English, like in regards to students, we've sent stuff to the LSB, BSU. We've also made sure that where possible, this signage is placed all over the borough. We do believe it makes a difference. There can be more, but the key thing is our community wardens are doing joint sessions with local S&Ts in making sure we're talking about these issues. And it is challenging because Kennington, for example, had a number of phone thefts. I was outside that police station, the tube station, with wardens distributing leaflets and things like that. And in fact, many people were just walking by us. So even with the signage, even with the additional stalls that we do set up across the borough, so Borough and Bankside has had similar engagement where our wardens are out at least once a month in those key areas, talking to residents, talking to tourists and making them aware. We're still not finding that people are having the behavioural change that we would expect. But saying that, obviously we want to get to a point where people don't have to hide their phones away, and that's why I think it's very important that the Met speak to the strategies that they are employing to actually reduce tool-enabled thefts. But from a community safety partnership perspective, myself and Emma Bond co-chair that board. What we've opted to do is to go around and visit each of those boards, and the key thematic priorities that are poignant for our residents is what we'll be looking into. And that's why at the start of my introducing myself, I spoke to this piece of work specifically around young people that are involved in these types of incidents and the work that needs to be done, and that cross-council working with the Youth Justice Service. I know that Emma Bond touched upon the issue of arrest rates and prosecution rates, but it's really important that there is some effective deterrent to deter the behaviour that we're seeing in Southwark.
Thank you. Councillor Pollock?
Rachel covered my question, actually. So,
okay, thank you. Councillor Parton?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the speakers for coming this evening. I had a few questions because I represent Rye Lane Ward in the heart of the borough, and obviously it's a very a thriving high street, but it is also a kind of epicentre for phone snatching in the borough, and there is quite a sense of almost fear in the area over these kind of offences, and people are very concerned, and I get this relayed to me very frequently from residents about the fear of these kind of robberies, these kind of snatchings in the local area. And one of the responses I frequently get from residents is, well, they almost see no point in trying to raise these issues with the police and definitely not the council. So what would you say, just as a first question, to residents who do feel that engaging with the police and authorities for these sorts of offences are futile?
I think my answer is going to be, but I guess is reasonably straightforward. We need an accurate picture. Unless we get a really accurate picture of the type of crime that is going on, then we can't task and we can't respond accordingly. Without that, it kind of is futile for us. And I understand the frustrations. I really do. I had a good friend who was a victim of a phone snatch, not far from where we are. So, and I really do relate to how frustrating it can be to be that victim. But unless our victims of crime have got that confidence to be able to speak to us, we can't offer them that support. We can't give them that right type of advice. We do make arrests. When we tend to make arrests, it tends to be individuals who are responsible for multiple offences. An extra offence gives us the ability to respond accordingly and potentially to get that right level of detection that we're all looking for. I really do. I do get it, and I do understand the frustration. But I would certainly encourage you to take all the opportunities to get our members of the public to engage, and at least give us a chance.
Thank you. And yes, no, I have multiple questions on some of those points as well. I'd like to come back to, but I think the next question I had, obviously, in relation to representing the ward of Rye Lane, and some of the responses we get from the local police team is how much a hub for these kind of crimes the High Street is because of some of the kind of infrastructure in the area in terms of mobile phone stores. And so I'd be quite keen to kind of get your sense in terms of the action that the Met is taking to kind of break the supply chains and the business models for these kind of phone thefts, especially in relation to Peckham Town Centre.
I would take you back to that there would be certain parts of that operationally which wouldn't be suitable to discuss within such an open forum. But I'd almost take you back to the answer I had. We would look to take opportunities within it. We have in the Peckham area, we have executed warrants of a very similar nature before, certainly in my time with the BCU. And again, any opportunity, I would look to do that again. There is certainly no impunity around it. And I would encourage all opportunity to look at the information in the intelligence. And if it is the right thing to do and it is the balanced thing to do to act and look to be as proactive as we can, we would look to take that.
Thank you. So, okay, that's helpful to kind of appreciate, because I don't think that the kind of efforts to tackle the supply chain were super detailed in here, but obviously I appreciate there's only so much you would want to say in a public forum. And kind of related to that point is obviously we also get a number of concerns from residents, especially parents, about children being targeted on their way to school, especially in some parts of the south of the borough. And so I would kind of like to have a bit more from the panel in terms of the specific actions that are being taken to protect young people, and particularly children, especially on their commutes to school and on their way home.
So I'll invite Caroline to answer a part of that, but certainly from a police perspective, I have an expectation around my staff, certainly my community support officers, that very broadly, if they're on duty and it's 3 o'clock or in the regions of 3 o'clock, they need to be outside of secondary school. My view is that is the ideal place for them to be. It's not just to prevent robbery or theft. It's one of the feedback we always get is that our staff aren't visible enough. It's a really good place for them to be visible. The provision for schools at the Metropolitan Police had changed around a year ago. But it's something that is very close to me and an expectation I have of my staff. So they're not always going to be there, Councillor. They're categorically not. They work a shift pattern, and for example, I can't think of your particular ward, but I've got wards with more than one secondary school, so the time is split accordingly. And of course, if an area of demand that comes in which needs to be answered, such as for example, a crime scene or a critical incident or a number of different things, that member of staff could be taken off to do something else. But on a very, very broad concept, if those PCSOs are on duty at 3 o'clock or in the environs of 3 o'clock, they should be in and around their secondary schools or in and around the transport hubs. There's going to be a change in the way of the provision of how we police transport network. That will be brought further. I don't know whether you're aware of that in the room, but a very long story short, Transport for London and those officers who've always had their own provision will be brought within inside of the neighbourhood portfolio. It doesn't particularly affect Southwark so much. It's more of an effect on Brixton because of the Vauxhall Transport Hub, but they will be brought into our tasking process and we can have slightly more control over them. I don't know whether you want to talk about transport routes, safer. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just touch upon something I mentioned earlier about deployment and obviously the weekly and monthly tasking of hotspots across the borough. So we've obviously got our CCTV, we're working closely with the police, we've got community wardens and also our young advisors, and I believe they came to the previous scrutiny session to talk about the kind of the youth voice. They're out doing outreach work. So in terms of what we call our safer routes or safer schools routes piece, that's about bringing that operational asset together and providing that capable guardianship within kind of across those routes, but at key times and locations. Surely there's a lot more work to be done around that. We know there is a real kind of a balance to be had in terms of deploying resources, but also pushing forward in terms of that trust and confidence, not just of young people being able to walk from home or from school to home, but also if they're dropping off en route as well. There's also about that reassurance to parents as well, that that we're doing. So a lot more work to be done, but that's the model that we're operating in those key areas.
Councillor Ennin?
Councillor Parton, thank you so much for your input, and it's deeply heart-wrenching to hear residents, businesses have lost faith and trust and confidence, not only in the police but in the council, to be able to address some of these key issues. As an elected member, one of the things that I've tried to do more than anything is to make sure that people understand the processes that we do have in place, but also to measure the impact of the work that we're doing in the area. We've already touched upon the new town centre policing teams. We've also touched on the S&T work, but robbery is a key priority for us, and we'll continue to work on that. The other point that I really wanted to speak to was around schools and children specifically. The work we do around schools and young people is something that we need to measure the impact on, because young people do continue to be impacted by phone thefts. I've been looking at some of the work that has been taking place in Waltham Forest, for example, where they're using detached youth workers that are often trusted adults to actually patrol these key areas and work with young people who are at risk of being the perpetrators and those who may be attracted to this. And there's been a pattern of behaviour that has been shown in that particular area, which is young people who may not be at school, involved in this sorts of activities. So I'm hoping in the coming months that we'll be able to implement a similar system. But the key thing for me is about reporting. What I'm finding time and time again is because phone theft is often linked to insurance, they'll only report if they need to get their phone replaced. But there are things that we're doing politically that are really, really important as well. So the Crime and Policing Bill introduces new respect orders. Once that comes into effect, it means that there will be additional powers. And that's an important piece of legislation in terms of being able to address some of the issues that we're seeing in our town centres. In addition to that, youth injunctions, which is really important because we know that some young people that are committing these offences may live in our council stock, and we need to have a robust response to that. So this is a piece of work that we're also picking up with our registered social landlords. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Neil?
A geographic question. How do you define the Elephant and Castle? You've spoken about the Elephant and Castle and kind of assumed that we know where the Elephant and Castle is, what the boundaries
Councillor,
are.
I'm really going to struggle to explain it to you without a map. If you would like me to share you, if you want to drop me your email, I can send you a map which explains the hexagons. I can't explain it to you without the use of a map.
Well, then perhaps if I could, what council wards are affected then by the Elephant and Castle?
It overlaps about 5 or 6.
Okay. And those councillors, how involved are they?
We're in the process of sending out some materials. I saw you last week at, was it Lamlish?
It was the Hales buildings, Hales TRA.
One of the key things that I highlighted is that residents often aren't aware of activity that is taking place. And one of the key things that I've been speaking to not only the Met about, but also the community safety team, is that when things are taking place in specific wards, that elected members and communities are involved. So you will have that information shortly.
Excellent. Thank you for that, and thank you for that.
If I could even attempt to explain it to you, I promise you I would. It would just come out as so random. I wouldn't be able. You wouldn't see it. But if you want to drop me a line, I can get you. I could share a map with you.
I think that's lovely. I think you've kind of amplified the problem that I'm pushing at. Thank you. I've got another question, if I may. It was about the hexagons. Great initiative. My mind kind of works on maps, and I understand maps. And I would love to see the geographic distribution of these hexagons. But I would also like to see the audio in here is particularly annoying. I would also like to see the crime data for each hexagon. I don't know if the hexagons are 10 square metres, 110 square metres. But are you able, I appreciate you might not be able to publish here, but would you be able to give us, is there a plan in due course to sort of say, well, this hexagon is a hotspot for phone snatching. This is a hotspot for drug use. Is that how the plan for the hexagons is going to play out?
So the Martello hexagons are done around predominantly around knife crime. So that's what Martello is based on, high harm offences. So I would imagine if I was able to dig deep enough, it would probably break it down per hexagon, but I I'm not 100% sure. I've got statistics that overlap the wider Martello. I wonder what a collection of hexagons is called. It's probably got something to describe it. That covers the Martello boundaries. Whether it goes down individual hexagons, I would imagine it does. Do I remember particularly seeing that? No, I don't remember seeing that.
Thank you. That's lovely. Thank you. That's it for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I had a couple of further questions, if I may. So there's some information in the report around the operational tactics that the Met are using. I just wondered if you could say a little bit more about how we're setting up officers to succeed when it comes to apprehending perpetrators in this particular crime. I think the thing that we hear from residents quite a lot is that you've got officers on foot, but perpetrators on bikes. How are we addressing that? That would be helpful to hear a little bit more about, please. And I just wanted to pick up also Councillor Bentley's earlier point on the illegally sort of jimmied electric bikes that are going over the 15-mile-an-hour limit. They are on the pavements. They don't require pedalling. They are illegal. Just whether you could say anything about some of the tactics that you might be using, maybe more widely across other boroughs, or working with other teams around awareness on that and apprehending those folk and confiscating those bikes. Thank you.
So I'm not going to go too much into tactics here, because actually we will be doing some planned operations moving forward, so I wouldn't want to give any of our tactics away, but just to provide some reassurance, obviously we do have our neighbourhood policing officers and our officers on the BCU that aren't trained as interceptors, but we have wider Met resource that I do bid for, and we get quite frequently on the borough to apprehend these offenders for that specific crime type. And we also do work cross borough with other BCUs and boroughs around this around the vehicle side of it, because obviously it does cross a number of boroughs, and there are operations that are being funded this month through my tactical policing meeting, that I can allocate resources, which we've got operations running to address those crime types. Yes, so rest assured that we might not have that capability within our teams on the actual borough, but we do have additional Met resource that we can bid for and do get to address those issues, which we'll use moving forward in our policing operations.
Thank you. Councillor Ennin, did you want to come in?
In regards to the two-wheeled enabled vehicles, the two things that have been considered and we're exploring through the community safety team is public space protection orders. However, you need the ability to enforce. So when I visited Croydon, for example, whilst they do have a PSPO for that, it's within a very small geographical area. And I believe Hammersmith and Fulham or Kensington also have one, but once again, it's limited to a specific geographical area. What I have seen to be effective is when there's a deployment of live facial recognition, for example, that during that time, because there's a number of officers in that geographical area, if somebody is going by on a two-wheeled enabled bike that is illegal, they will be stopped and apprehended, and it is a good deterrent to those who are driving on those bikes, and I've witnessed that personally. So there is a lot more work to do. I think the use of interceptors is something that I would advocate really strongly for in Southwark. I think it's effective. I've seen incidents where I've stood outside and I've seen 5 phones being snatched in one swoop. But then I've also seen the police turn up very quickly. However, they're in cars and the little alleyways mean they can't get through. So the use of interceptors is something that I would strongly urge for. I know Emma has spoken about her conversations with Westminster and Charing Cross. My biggest concern is that when there is enforcement activity there, then it increases activity here. And whilst two-wheeled enabled bikes is what we're focusing on, I'm looking at the whole gamut and the impact that it has on the perception of our communities about their safety.
Can I just come in there, please? So we do look at displacement. So we're starting to look at operations around the specific crime type rather than the borough boundaries, because we recognise that there's displacement. If you have an enforcement in one area, then you are going to see displacement somewhere else. So that is something that we do monitor and something that we are looking at to have more wider operations to address that issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to build on the illegal electric bikes point, so is there more? So the fire service talked very eloquently at OSC a few months ago when we had the community safety partnership there around some of the awareness work that they're doing. Is there anything more to say around what more could be done there, either from the police or from the council, in terms of awareness around, particularly, I guess it's delivery drivers that we see it happening with a lot as well. So this is not about the theft, but this is about the sort of nuisance point, but where we've got awareness that needs to be driven around these bikes are illegal. Yes, you bought it online and so therefore assumed it's legal, but they're illegal. Is there anything more that can be done there around the awareness point there, just to avoid the nuisance rather than anything?
Definitely there's much more work that can be done. As part of reviewing our community safety partnership, what we're looking at is who do we need to talk to, and that's a key part of the engagement that we're doing, because delivery drivers often work for businesses. In my experience as an elected member on my ward, actually engaging with some of these companies to take responsibility has been a key issue. There are key locations across this borough where I've seen the community safety team engaging with McDonald's, for example, in Camberwell due to the key issues. And we do intend to extend that work, but there is an issue of resource. One of the things that we're actually looking at is the role of the Southwark Policing Oversight Board, which you will have here today, to make sure that we're broadening that conversation, because it's come through in our neighbourhoods piece as well. Businesses, old people, residents are not happy with the two-wheeled enabled bikes, and there's a lot more work to do around the dangers of it, because I don't believe all parents even know the risk that it poses. But in regards to the delivery drivers, it's definitely something that we can do more work on, and we have plans to.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Neil.
Yeah, mate. On page 14, there's a graph or there's a graphic. It would seem like men are 3 times as likely to be victims of crime. I wondered if that quite kind of scares me, really, as a man, that I'm in a demographic which is more likely, 3 times more likely to be a crime victim. I wondered if you'd want to comment on that.
Yeah, I think, we recognise that, and it's obviously we look at the data and monitor sort of details around victims and suspects. I think you'll find that as well, it's in the 18 to 24, 25 age range, so it's those young people, sadly, that are victims of crime, and it is something that we are aware of and we do take into account when we're looking at addressing this issue.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions? No. Okay, thank you very much for your time and giving us an overview of that topic. We'll move on to the next agenda item. So, Emma, I think you're going to stay with us, but if everyone else could feel free to return to their seats. Thank you. Thank you. So next item on the agenda was just a sort of broader interview item. So is there any other broader questions outside the topic that we've just covered? So is there anything, Emma, that you'd like to say more broadly about the broader remit of your role outside of the particular topic that we've just talked about before we go into questions?
So I think just, I think what's worth noting at this point is the investment in neighbourhood policing and the change that the Met has made around sort of that policing and that neighbourhood approach. So yes, we're facing challenging times with budgets, and which is obviously difficult. But by the realignment of resources and the uplift that we've seen from the Home Office, we've now got much bigger neighbourhood policing teams, which I think is a real benefit to the borough. Now we've got the additional policing resources in Peckham, we've got them in Elephant and Castle area, which again, when you're looking at these crime types and those hotspot areas and that perception of safety, I think it's really important that we've got these officers, and I think it's a good addition alongside the neighbourhood wardens that the council have got, which they work closely with to keep people safe. So I think from a policing perspective, although we've got challenges, I think the movement of increasing officers in that neighbourhood space, I think is, for me, I think is a really positive move. And as a result of that, although we've seen increases in shoplifting across the country, we part of that has been because it's been heavily underreported before, and now with our neighbourhood policing teams out and about in the communities, in those shops, providing that reassurance and encouragement with those businesses, we've seen the increase rises because they've now got the confidence to report. But what we've also seen is the positive outcomes, the offenders being apprehended, and were having an impact in that crime type. So I think the benefits that we're seeing from investing in neighbourhood policing, in line with the new Met for London too, I think is really positive.
Okay, thank you. I might just kick us off, if that's okay, with a broader question. So one of the things that we hear from residents a fair amount, and it links to the point you just made around the neighbourhood policing teams, is we get to know the local team, and then the faces change because folk are moved out. And so I just wondered if you could say a little bit more on how are you ensuring as much as possible that we have that continuity, and that local neighbourhood policing teams can build those relationships with the local community too, which therefore impacts on trust and confidence. It increases the likelihood of reporting to the local team, etc. Could you say a bit more about that?
Absolutely. And I totally accept that actually to build trust and confidence, to knowing who your neighbourhood police officer is and having that local contact increases trust and confidence, and it gives people that reassurance. And as much as we can, both Jim and I like to keep the teams as stable as we can, but obviously people get promoted, people move on jobs and retire, so we have all sorts of obviously employment issues like everybody else, life events for people. So we will have changes. I'd like to say that you're not going to have changes, but we will, but we try to minimise that because we recognise that actually in neighbourhood policing it's really important to our communities to build those relationships. And if we are going to improve trust and confidence, then we need stability. We've got, which I've tried to keep stability in the senior leadership team across the borough, so that actually people, feel again from our officers' perspective that they know who their leaders are and they know the direction of travel, and you get that stability in policing. And also it improves our relationships with our local authorities when we can have some time to work together to deliver these results.
Absolutely. Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Bentley and Councillor Pollock.
Once again, sorry, 2 questions. I guess I just wanted to say I fully agree with what you've said. Like, my local police team in my ward have been remarkable. They've done walkabouts with me. When I've raised issues with them, they've dealt with them very promptly. And I feel like they are the people who know the ward as well as I do, and it's been really reassuring. That said, I do worry about the resourcing, and I also, one of the things that's come up is the kind of almost like mental health support for them, which I understand there have been cuts on that side of the fence that we don't necessarily see on the kind of front line of the fence. So it'd be useful to hear about that. And then late last year, I I think I would use the word privileged, to have a ride-along with the police. I mean, my God, it was really quite eye-opening. That was only an afternoon, but it really struck me that a lot of the issues that they were dealing with were social as much as criminal, and I think those points are really, of concern to me. We came across a woman who, was she breaking into the house? Was she fleeing domestic violence? And it really wasn't even clear by the end of it what on earth was going on. And I'm just wondering, like, how that kind of wraparound support is really there, that, the police are coming out when actually it's probably a social worker issue as much as anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so touching on the first one, resourcing. So from a sort of your local neighbourhood policing perspective, you shouldn't see a change in that. The uplift that we've got is here and shouldn't change. That's the model that we've got. So it may well be that your officers may change, but you will still have those ward officers, and we've still got those town centre teams and that investment in neighbourhood policing. That is our model under the new Met for London too. So that you shouldn't see that change. In relation to that officer support, yeah, it's been a really tricky one, because if you've not got a lot of resources and people are phoning 999, where do you put your resource? And you obviously, when you phone 999, you want the police to come. So we've had to move some of the functions that we've had away from those, what people would call back office jobs, into that frontline policing space, so that we have got enough officers to answer 999 calls. That doesn't mean that we're not sort of looking as a borough and as the Met to look at how do we best support our officers. So we have, occupational health referrals, we do various when the officers come back into the station, we have various processes where we'll do sort of local debrief, like informal debriefing, just to check out that everybody's okay, because as you say, they go to traumatic incident after traumatic incident, and it does have an effect on people, sadly. So we are very conscious of that, and it is, as an SLT, in fact today we've been on our SLT away day, and it's one of the things that we've been talking about, is how do we better support our officers who are going from traumatic call to traumatic call, and how do we best support them for now and for their mental health in the future.
There was the bit about the social as well as the criminal. So, for example, if you're going out to see somebody who, say, clearly got a substance abuse issue that may have manifested in shoplifting,
yes,
but clearly the support they need is maybe not being locked up in a prison cell.
No, absolutely, and we've moved to a model of what we call right care, right person. So now, when initially the police would go to every call, and it's not always, as you've rightly said, it's not always a policing problem, and also you don't always want the police to turn up to those incidents. Sometimes it's not our space to be in. So actually, by adopting the right care, right person, sometimes that's the LAS to go to, and actually then if it's then a policing problem once they've got there, then we will be called to come along too. But you're absolutely right, and also that's not only is it's the right thing for the victim, for the person. It's also, if the police are always going, it's a drain on policing resource that could be answering a 999 call somewhere else. So it's really important that we get it right.
Thank you. Councillor Pollock.
Thanks. Rachel again nicked a couple of my questions, but I've got others. I represent South Bermondsey Ward, and it has had a long history of the far right being quite present in the area. It's where Millwall fans congregate on match day, and it's been a big effort over the past sort of 12 years I've been a councillor. I know Councillor Neil was my predecessor in that ward. It was even worse back then. But in terms of things we've been doing on skills development or building hundreds of council homes or visible improvements to the high street, etc., we've done an awful lot to try and make the place genuinely welcoming and integrated, and to promote a strong community cohesion in the area, with a lot of success actually over that period. However, we are where we are. So October 26th last year, the day of the enormous march, Tommy Robinson, and so on, we had between 150, 200 men draped in St George's flags on that day, kind of lining the pavements, making people feel very intimidated, shops that closed, stalls that closed on the market that day. And it really spooked a lot of people in the area. It's a sort of proud, strong, multicultural community. So I kind of had a couple of questions to sort of follow on from this. So one is a sort of stats question. Have you actually seen any rise in racially aggravated crime and hate crime since the end of October, or any kind of patterns in particular that are worthy of note? And the second really is about what you might be able to say in terms of making the community feel protected and reassured. Should there be another Tommy Robinson style, hundreds of thousands of people out on the streets of London? When that happens again, what can we do to prepare better and make the place feel kind of protected from that?
Thank you. So if I can get back to you on the hate crime figures, because I don't know what that looks like from that point. So we can get back to you on that. And I'm going to bring Jim in around the public order, because Jim works in that space. But what I would say is on that day, it caught the Met off guard. We did end up having what we call mutual aid, which is support from other forces to come and assist us because of the amount of people in London on that day. But I'll bring Jim in.
So that day was a really challenging day. Yeah, a huge, thanks, boss. Really challenging day for the organisation, and it obviously replicated within the Blue. I think if we were to look forward, I would expect United Kingdom to come out again. I would certainly expect that within the next few months. There's a piece there of reflecting locally about how we deal with that local demand. So when you have something like the United Kingdom, there's thousands of police officers on duty for that, and I mean thousands of police officers. And obviously the rest of London still has to operate at the same time, which is a real challenge for us to do. For something, if I reflect back to that day, there's an overlap there. There's an overlap between what's a central public order operation, dealing with the march from A to B, but the rest of London, and then the rest of London has to operate as well. We would operate if so. I wasn't a public order commander on that day, but I regularly am a public order commander. There is always a link between the public order commanders and what we would call frontline policing. I would reflect back to that particular event, and I don't think that we delivered the link locally to the public order command as well as we should have done. So we have reflected on that. We have done some work with the public order commanders who were responsible for that, and Mark Gallagher and I, who Mark's the superintendent for Brixton, we will ensure that we do a better job next time round. There's a piece there of the whole of London was busy. So there would have been the scenes that you described were replicated across an awful lot of public houses across the capital. But as we move forward to the next United Kingdom event, we will get that better. We will get that better to a local link to our police response, how we deal with it from a neighbourhood perspective, and how that links into a public order response.
That's a really reassuring response. I can only imagine what an absolute how overwhelming that day would have been for the police force. Can you give us an idea of what that public order link would look like next time, and how it would be different to last time round?
So really, I'd describe it as understanding the nuance. So if you didn't understand the Blue, you wouldn't be able to help work out a policing plan for it. There's a matter of it being having some understanding of a local understanding the local community. So, for example, the impact on a local community for Brixton and the impact of a local community for Bermondsey, everybody in this room knows is going to be really, really different. And unless you can understand the community you are policing with, my argument is how do you get the right level of response? So what would that look like? So I'm not saying it will be me for the day, but it very well may be me. It would probably be Mark or I, and it will be making sure our community, number one, knows what's going on. And I know there's perhaps an assumption that everybody did, but maybe they didn't. You know, not everybody is linked into mainstream or social media. So, for example, you mentioned the shops, you mentioned the public houses, trying to understand what the right level of police and response would be for that, and actually making sure that there is the right level of police and response. Undoubtedly, we were very, very focused on central London that day. I do know, because I was involved in some of the debrief, I do know that the Blue did receive some policing attention, but it certainly didn't receive the policing attention that other parts of central London would. But I would say it's, I guess, to try and be really honed down on the question you've answered, it's understanding the local community and help building the police response to it, both locally and from a public order perspective.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Neil.
Thanks. If I just picking up on the forthcoming May the 16th rally, there are a few people that profess to know their wards as well as local councillors. St George's ward last year was a meeting point of being the closest ward in Southwark to Waterloo, had designated meeting points. Members of the community that I represent were afraid to go out on that day, and although I walked the ward that morning, and I was concerned. There was a police presence there at some of the pubs. I don't think that I didn't see any presence from the from Southwark Council's uniformed staff, but that's something perhaps that I should raise separately. But perhaps there was an opportunity now for me to say, please speak to the local councillors I don't know if, but please speak to the local councillors who will know about the local pubs and the local issues in their wards. Please come to us. That's kind of what we're here for. I wanted to ask you more specifically about the use of facial recognition. It's got its detractors, and it's got people that will speak for it. It's quite controversial. It's a new thing, a relatively new thing. I understand that it was trialled at the Elephant and Castle. I think one of the supermarkets at the Elephant and Castle is using it now. But what can I say to people when they express their concerns about facial recognition use? Thank you.
Yeah, so we've had 17 deployments on the borough for live facial recognition. That's in Peckham and Woolworth. I think London Bridge has also had, I think they had the first one actually, and when it was first deployed on the borough. We've had 105 arrests from those, and 76 of those are people who live in Southwark. So the majority of the offenders that are arrested are residents from this area. I think for me, obviously, there's a court challenge that's going through at the moment, but the Met still use it. And that's around, I think, the company that set up the live facial recognition, but actually the Met use it as a tactic, and it's something that's used by us. We bid for that resource. I think it's a really effective resource to use to keep people safe. It's but for the officers that are out deployed with the van, the images are uploaded in the morning, so it's up-to-date data, and those people that are uploaded are people that are wanted by the Met for offences. So these are people who have committed offences and are circulated as wanted for those offences. And then when it's deployed in a specific area, and we've got officers there, they'll have like it's like a little phone, and the image will come up of the person that's walked through it for the activation, and then a picture of their police image will come up, so that they then can go and have an interaction. It's not an immediate arrest, but they will go and have an interaction with that person, to check that it is somebody who's wanted, and it is the person that we believe it is. So actually it's much more precise than stop and search, for example. So I hope that provides you with some reassurance.
That's great. May I come back with the... so it's mainly people who've got warrants out for them, and inevitably, do you have the data on the number of false positives?
So we can get back to it's very. I don't know. Do you know if there's been any?
It's very, very minimal. However, there is a reasonably well publicised false positive that happens to be within the Borough of Southwark that I know is within the mainstream media. But honestly, Councillor, it is very, very, very minimal. Ma'am is right. For any of you who've got questions from your constituents, please drop us a line, come and see it, because once you've seen it in action, it is so powerful and so compelling that I challenge you not to be convinced by the technology.
So it's people who are wanted by the Met for offences, it's people who are wanted by the courts on a court warrant, and then there's people who've got specific orders that will show on there, and we will stop them and check that they are abiding by their orders, basically.
In the main, it's individuals who are wanted for violent crime, who are thriving within our communities, who, without the opportunity presented by live facial recognition, would be extremely difficult to be arrested and who would remain wanted for an awful long time. It's taking violence out of your communities. Come and see it. Come and see it in action.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parton.
Thank you, Chair. I had a few questions, if that was okay, and I think I'd quite keen to kind of open some of these questions, given that this is an annual interview, with just a bit of a kind of step back and just take a wider look at this. And I'm keen to take the opportunity, because I don't think we've met before, to kind of ask some broader questions about your role. And I think the first thing that came to my mind was about what you think are the public's highest policing priorities in the borough, because I'm obviously just keen to get a sense of what you think that the real top issues are for residents.
So our three main priorities on the BCU are high harm offending. So that covers your robbery, your knife crime. So it's reducing that offending, but also improving our positive outcomes, so bringing more offenders to justice. Violence against women and girls is also a priority for the BCU, again, to encourage reporting and better support of our victims, but also apprehension of our offenders, and also the embedding neighbourhood policing in line with the Commissioner's vision and a new Met for London. And I'm not saying that we don't deal with any other crime, but those are our three priorities for the BCU.
Thank you. And I'd just be keen to get a sense in, cause obviously those are the priorities, but I would be keen to kind of get a sense from you as to what you think are the biggest factors inhibiting you achieving those priorities. What are the biggest challenges to you actually fully addressing high harm offending, or what are the main roadblocks?
Well, I mean, for us, as you mentioned earlier, we need people to report. We need people to tell us what the actual problem is. A lot of all of those areas in the Vogue space, in the knife crime and robbery, people don't report. And because of, lack of trust and confidence in policing, and historically there's been an issue, and we are building on that. We're working hard to improve trust and confidence across the borough. And I'm hoping that as we move forward with our new model within neighbourhood policing and our focus in these areas, that actually will encourage people to report, to improve trust in us, so that we can then provide victims with the best possible service and apprehend offenders and bring them to justice. What I would also say while I'm here is to encourage people to sign up to Met Engage. And I know that people are wary of giving their details to police, again, because of the lack of trust and confidence. But actually, there's so much information on there around their specific areas, and we can get messages out quickly to people on Met Engage. So I really do encourage people, A, to report crime, B, to use Crime Stoppers for any intelligence, because actually the more intelligence that we have, and I get that not everybody feels that they, you know, are confident to speak to the police, or that they they want to remain anonymous, then please use Crime Stoppers, because we do get that intelligence through and their details aren't shared with us. So it's so important that we get the intelligence picture, that we get victims reporting to us, and also that we get people to our communities to sign up to Met Engage, because again, that's a way that we can send messages out quickly about crime hotspots and crime prevention, but also keep people updated with what's going on.
Thank you. And yes, as someone that uses Met Engage, I would say it is a very useful tool. And for the record, we do encourage, I definitely do, and I know my ward colleagues do, encourage residents to sign up as and where possible, and signpost it as a resource. And I would just kind of touch on some experiences I've had in my own ward. We've had a spate of kind of quite visible robberies, muggings, phone thefts in especially around the Bellenden Road, Maxted Road area, and it's put the community really on high alert. And as local councillors, we've tried to get in front of that and bring the community together, bring the community into the same room with the police, with the council, to try and really allay residents' concerns. And I think one concern that's come through to me from residents, not just in that instant, but more broadly, has been that obviously as soon as we tell people to sign up to Engage, often they are very receptive to that. But it comes back to kind of, and you touched upon this in the, and this is touched upon a bit more broadly in the oversight annual report, but the oversight committee's annual report. But it's, for example, it's it's the visibility, like just not seeing police on the streets, or feeling like there is no visibility, and B, it's almost just a responsiveness. Like if you have an officer's email address or phone number, it's what's the response? We've had this with quite significant issues of cuckooing in the ward, where it's I'm accountable to the residents in terms of needing to respond pretty punctually, and I know this isn't every issue, but sometimes it's like if a resident is quite fearful or sensing that this situation isn't escalating, they don't always necessarily need a community meeting or a broad email send on the high level stats. It's just a response to say, hi, thanks, we've received your inquiry and we're working on it. And I know that's kind of a very micro level, but sometimes it's the experience of residents can vary quite significantly between feeling that okay, the community's the police is on it versus I just don't get a response kind of thing unless I call 999 and someone's breaking into my house right now. I appreciate that resources are stretched. So I'd just be keen to kind of get a bit of your sense about, well, obviously we talk about the kind of the technology enabling the Met to engage a bit more with community, but what about like almost at the fundamental level between just it's like knowing your local officers, it's responding to people when they directly ask you something, and just being visible on the street.
So, I mean, visibility is always a tricky one, isn't it? We've got cops out, and some people will notice that they're there, and some people won't. And I get that we've reduced in size, but actually, I would argue that with the uplift in the neighbourhood policing teams, you should start to see more officers out and about on the street. And also, I would point communities to their ward officers. So, find out who your local ward officer is. Go to your ward panel meetings, because that's a really good opportunity to speak to your local team, to raise any issues that isn't a 999 issue, and actually have that contact, because all of the areas now should have a designated team that have their contact details available, should they be needed. And again, like I said, go, use that ward panel meeting that's there. That the purpose of it is to go and meet the officers. We also offer walk and talks with officers and various other sort of engagement events that take place. So again, encouraging people to sign up to Met Engage so you can see what we are doing in that engagement space too, so that people feel safer and can come and engage with us, if you know, for when it isn't a 999 issue, but actually they want to have that interaction and that contact with officers.
Councillor, the other thing I would say to you is that you've got a clear escalation process. So if you're not getting the answers that you need from the new modelling, that you have your own superintendent, your own chief inspector, and 3 inspectors. So if you're not getting the answer that you need, I've got officers who will give you the right answer. Just remind me who your sergeant is.
Yeah, Jared Collier-Smith, but I would just come back on that.
He's an excellent sergeant,
yeah,
so I'm sure you haven't got any issues there.
He's very responsive to me as a councillor, and I would say for the record that the neighbourhood team in Peckham is great, and the ward panel meetings are very well staffed, and they always come very well briefed with all the issues in the area. Could I possibly ask one more question? It was really about, as I'm sure he's told you all in detail, one of the concerns that local officers have raised with us is around potential for PSPO powers, especially around hotspot and problem areas like Peckham Square and other parts along Rye Lane. And so I know individual officers have raised this as like it's a priority for them. They need these PSPO powers. What's your kind of sense? What's the Met in Southwark's kind of stance on PSPO powers, and what kind of powers do you think would be most beneficial for the council to have?
So I do think it's a tactical option. I've seen it used really well. I've also seen it used really poorly. I've previously worked on BCUs where it is a BCU-wide power. I'm not entirely convinced in my own mind that that's the right proportionate answer, but that is my own individual opinion as compared to others. I do think it is useful. It is a useful tactical option. I've seen it used well for street drinking. I think the idea of two-wheeled enabled crime is an absolutely fantastic idea. It would take some thinking. It would take a structure around it to enable it to enforce. I've talked with my Southwark colleagues a number of times around the use of PSPO powers, and it is something which we are looking to progress. I think it just needs to be the right measured response for the right individual area, because otherwise I just think it probably takes us to a level where you don't get the right level of proportionality around it. I do think it can solve some problems. I do, and I would be supportive of it in the right area and the right circumstance. But there are times when I just don't view it as quite balanced. And again, it should always be viewed as a tactical option. It should be viewed as something for, and not a one size fits all. But in the right circumstance, I'd be supportive and I think we are making slow and steady progress.
Thank you. I just had one further question, if I may. Thank you for spending the time with us this evening. We talked at Overview and Scrutiny Committee a few months ago about broader trust and confidence. It was particularly around the time of the Charing Cross revelations, etc. I just wondered, I'd be interested in your view on how would you rate the BCU at the moment in terms of performance against the trust and confidence plan. If you were to say A++, we're smashing it out of the park versus, F, we're flunking. Where would you rate yourself, and where are the areas where you're keen to focus on moving forward?
Yeah, so we spoke about Charing Cross last time, and just horrendous, terrible behaviour, and just abhorrent. We work really hard in this space on the BCU, so we've been working with the local authority, supporting the local trust and confidence initiative, but also wider from the BCU's perspective, we've also put some local measures in place so that we can assure ourselves as much as you can that we would identify and addressing any issues across the BCU. So we now have a culture and people board, which the SLT attend, and we look at various things around some of our processes, for example, just fairness in course allocation and fairness in promotion processes. So all aspects of those cultural issues that we've seen take place at Charing Cross. We've also looking around rotation and whether we move people around the BCU, around different jobs. Obviously, what you've mentioned today is people don't. It's difficult, isn't it? Because people want to have that continuity, but at the same time, you've got to be alive to the fact that you don't want to have an issue where poor cultures can thrive. So it's one for us to that we are alive to as SLT and look at what we do with that. But we now have a network of women on the BCU. We have culture buddies. So if officers want to go and talk to someone and they don't necessarily want to talk to their line manager, they can go and talk to somebody else about a specific issue. We encourage reporting off. They were cultures that had been able to be created, and so it's encouraging our officers to speak out if that was, to have that psychological safety, to be able to speak out if something wasn't right, and that they would be supported. But also, and I recognise that not everybody would feel comfortable to do that, so it's making sure that officers and staff know how to report anonymously if there was to be a problem. So I don't think you can ever say 100% as much as you'd like to that actually, that's not happening. But I would say that we're in a good space from a BCU perspective to identify any issues should become apparent.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions? No, thank you very much, both of you, for coming along and spending so much time with us tonight. We really appreciate it. Is there anything you'd like to say before we conclude and move on to the next item?
I'd just like to say thank you for your support. We really do appreciate it. I know we don't always get it right, but we've got some really committed officers, and I think you'll see that in your neighbourhood policing teams who are really committed to doing the right thing. And I would welcome any of you to reach out to me or to Jim to come along to some of our policing operations, our LFR ride-alongs. We welcome you to come and see us in action, because we really do value your support and the wider work of the local authorities. So thank you.
Thank you very much, both of you. Thank you. Okay, I'll invite you to take your seats again, and we'll move on to the next item. So we're on to now the item around the Police Oversight Board, so all connected this evening. So we'll be rejoined by the Chair of the Board, Councillor Natasha Ennin, Cabinet Member for Community Safety and Neighbourhoods, and also delighted to welcome some of our independent board members as well to discuss the work of the board with reference to the annual report that was circulated in the supplemental agenda before the meeting as well. And we also have Alice Bird joining us online, who's the Programme Manager from the Community Scrutiny team in the Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime, otherwise known as MOPAC. And Alice will be supporting Councillor Ennin in discussing MOPAC's Community Scrutiny Transformation Programme, their planned training and support for scrutineers, and how we'll work together to enhance community-based scrutiny of policing in Southwark. So thank you everyone for joining us. If you wouldn't mind, could I just ask you to, again, just do a quick run of introductions so we know who everyone is, and then it'd be good to go through a short summary of the board's work this year and some words on the transformation programme as well, as I mentioned. Thank you.
Hello everyone, it's the African, but not really. All right, I'm going to be serious. It's Councillor Natasha Ennin, the Cabinet Member for Community Safety and the Chair of the Southwark Policing Oversight Board.
Evening, it's Caroline Thwaites, Assistant Director for Community Safety and Partnerships. Just to confirm, the Community Safety team supported the development of the board initially, and it provides the administration and coordination.
Hi everyone, I'm Cleo Carpenter, I'm a board member.
Evening everyone, I'm Charlotte Henry, board member.
Good evening everyone, my name is Nathan Lewis and I'm a board member.
And Alice online? Oh, you're very quiet online, Alice. Sorry, it's our audio in the room. We'll try and get that sorted.
Yeah, I'll have to call in tech support.
Okay, we'll call in tech support, Alice, so we can make sure that we can hear you. If you can bear with us, thank you. Just checking, can you hear us? Okay. Yeah, lovely. Okay, brilliant. So in that case, we might just, if we can kick off with Councillor Ennin, and then we'll try and get the audio sorted for you to come in, Alice.
Okay. So I want to start off by thanking the previous borough commander, Seb, Ajay Ado, for his commitment, and the senior Met colleagues as a whole. I also want to thank the community safety team for their role in supporting the governance and the structure, as well as the board for putting themselves forward. As set out in the report, it's the first board of its kind to focus exclusively on the trust and confidence plan of the Met in response to the Casey and Angelini reviews. And it's been a journey. To speak more to the substantive points, ahead of the board being established, we attended the prior commission, which was chaired by Councillor Sam Foster, as part of the pre-scrutiny. So what happened there is the terms of reference of the actual board was scrutinised and reviewed. Equally, the internal governance, as well as the Central South Trust and Confidence Plan. I want to note Councillor Foster's reservations at the time as the chair. Primarily, it was about what impact could the board have in light of the fact that there was no escalation points, and whether or not we would be able to make a change on embedding culture within the Met locally. The board made 2 recommendations. Chair, are you happy for me to read those 2 recommendations?
By all means.
The first was that the Cabinet and the Cabinet Member for Community Safety explore the options for the creation of a police oversight body for accountability in policing, and as an intermediary body between ward panels for policing and the Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime within the municipal year 2024-25. For reasons already expressed, that wasn't the remit of the actual Trust and Confidence Plan. The Trust and Confidence Plan was a direct response to the Casey review. Further to that, you've had the borough commander up, as well as the superintendent that has spoke to the work they're doing with their ward panels and their progression through Met Engage. Notwithstanding, we do have someone from MOPAC here, and there have been discussions about how this board may be able to link into MOPAC, and you've seen at the start of the foreword, we've made a commitment to share the work that we've undertaken with the Police and Crime Committee, as well as MOPAC. So that recommendation was partially accepted. Are you happy for me to go to the second one? The Cabinet immediately commissioned officers to work with the London Met in creating police contact posters for local areas showing contact information in an effort to advertise and increase visibility of local policing in Southwark. As you can see, this is something that's ongoing. It's something that each of the commission members have spoke to across the piece, but I do want to highlight the work that the council has done in this area. We've committed to using our own comms to actually promote the work that the police do. So we have a community e-safety newsletter, which goes out monthly. Over 48,000 people are opening this. In most recent times, what we've done is promoted activities that have happened across the borough. Most recently, Operation Roscovia, which took place in the North Walworth area, which covers the Hexagon under Operation Martello, but also the Action Day that took place in Peckham. In terms of activities that are happening across the borough, a similar plan has been followed through. Comms are being shared regularly. We've also hosted the Met for London event and promoted that through our resources. One of the key things that we've been able to do is secure inspectors to attend 2 out of 4 of our neighbourhood forums, and we think that this is an important space to increase visibility of the police, especially higher up. You've already addressed questions to the borough commander and the superintendent about the visibility and the uplift in the area, and you can see that as a borough we don't have the lowest numbers of police officers, there are issues around abstractions, which is an ongoing problem, but this is a London Met-wide issue. One of the things I wanted to highlight from the neighbourhood forums is the success that some neighbourhoods have achieved. For example, whilst Met Engage is a really important platform, it's not the only platform that can be used to engage with residents. Residents that are digitally excluded, where English is their second language, may not be able to use this platform, and as a result of that, the Met have offered a copper with a copper in South Bermondsey in the Blue Library, and they've increased patrols during school hours as a direct result of that. So in regards to that recommendation, we've been able to act on that. However, it didn't exclusively apply to the board. Now, in regards to the exciting bits about the board, it's been a fantastic year. We couldn't have done it without the support of the officers, but one of the things that has been significant has been the work that has gone in by the board members in terms of looking at that trust and confidence plan. You can see the figures. We've held 4 boards. We've retained 7 members. Looking at some of the other reports that I had looked into, for example, for the Greater Manchester Ethics Committee, these are professional bodies that have advisory panels. For us, we didn't have that, but we've still been able to retain our membership with only one person dropping off for the duration. Looking at the Hackney model, they had a higher drop-off rate and had to constantly recruit and train members, but we didn't have that experience with this board. And I think it's due to the support that we had from the council in terms of managing the governance and the fact that it was innovative. One of the things that really, really stood out to us from the onset was that the Trust and Confidence Plan was not a public document. So even though it was in the public domain by the virtue that it had come to pre-scrutiny, it was a document that wasn't in the public, and it's still not in the public domain, but there's some work going on around that. In terms of chairing the board, when we started the process, the police were in special measures, which subsequently changed. And we knew that trust and confidence was at an all-time low. What we didn't want to do is walk into that board, you know, constantly trying to criticise and condemn the police, but really wanted to understand what that trust and confidence meant to them, how embedded was it within the actual Met framework. And at times there were some pushbacks, but we were able to overcome some of those hurdles. But some of the greatest responses was actually when we did our first meeting in public, where we actually saw a really high footfall. Over 80 people turned up, and they were engaged with the process. The key thing for us was that we realised there's much more work that we needed to do in terms of diversity, and we made a commitment to move that board around. And as you can see, the board has gone to 4 different locations, so it's not static. I don't want to hog the mic because we've got board members here. One of the other things I really wanted to point out was that the Met didn't get additional resource in order to do this. So there is no dedicated person. So they're doing this in addition to their work. Similarly, our community safety team are in a similar position where to gain additional resource. I want to sort of end on that note and open up to the board, if you're happy for me to do that, and then for Alice to come in at the end and Caroline to contribute as well. Thank you.
Of course, by all means.
Sorry, before we have that, can I ask that Superintendent Jim Brockway joins, since he was with us from the inception as well?
Of course, happy to do that. Thank you. Welcome back, Jim.
Thank you. I'll be brief for time. So I was one of the later co-opted members, and I'm just very thankful that the board exists. I'm very conscious, and it's noted in the foreword, that if this board doesn't exist, I don't know what mechanism would be in existence to actually critique the trust and confidence plan, and that's been an ongoing thing for us. We really want to be able to ensure that it's it's fit for purpose and that it's publicly available, and that we as a board can really use it as an accountability mechanism. What I'll also say is the last year you've spoken about the Hackney board, and I was actually going to say the last year I think what the team has done, I think really expertly, is bringing people who genuinely care and are knowledgeable and who are actual true experts in their field, whether it be around safeguarding, whether it be around VORG, whether it be around community engagement, young people. And I think that mix, a really, really good job has been done. I think nobody foresees dropping out as yet. What I would very much say is that we all are committed to the remit of understanding that there is low confidence and low trust, and even with our different backgrounds are committed to actually seeing how we can be a middle ground, a support mechanism, not just in the board, but actually communicating and connecting with communities. So I'll just finish off in saying that my remit will be around connecting with seldom heard communities and resident engagement, and I've worked in Southwark for a very long time, Community Southwark, Health Watch, mental health wards, all that kind of stuff, and I know that term can be a bit polarizing for people, but I think it's really apt, and I'm really looking forward to supporting communities. Lastly, I'm mindful that this is only a 2-year pilot. And so when we're talking about trust and confidence, trust can be a very, very vague word. How long does it really take to embed trust? I think that's a conversation for another time. So that's something I would really want to ponder, whether there's further resource to actually extend or to amend what this looks like moving forward. As after a first year of initiative, that's when you really start to really get your legs. I would love to see this go on for longer than a year.
Thank you.
So I was going to reflect a little bit on our first year as well. So I think it took us a bit of time to get into a good rhythm as board members and how we wanted to work together and how we can make sure that how we were operating was actually really sophisticated. So we did meet a lot outside of the board meetings, and we didn't have formal training or extra resources. But there were times when I think I myself even became a bit concerned about the impact that we were actually going to have. So we continued to push through to say, okay, what is the best process for us to work together? So how often would we meet outside of board meetings? How can we bring in all of our expertise to make sure that we're asking the right questions ahead of board meetings so that our recommendations are really accurate? Now I feel like we have got into a better place as a board, but I think we do need to work closely with the police to really understand how their process for implementing the recommendations, and is that a priority for them? And this links to one of our recommendations, which is around the Trust and Confidence Plan itself. So the Trust and Confidence Plan was actually established before we were initiated as a board, and we wanted to use it as a mechanism to be able to track impact against all of the actions that they laid out in the plan. But it transpired they weren't actually using it as an active log themselves to measure impact. So we're going to hopefully work with the police to use it as an active log, so we know that they're tracking impact internally, so we can hold them to account in that regard.
And just to reflect on my year. So just to say, firstly, I'm really pleased to have sat on this board and to be given the opportunity. And I want to thank Councillor Ennin for your support, and the community team as well, and the police. The first year, I suppose, on reflection, it was difficult at first establishing our relationships as a board, the document, as my colleagues have said, and really the mechanisms that we were going to use. So there were a number of challenges, but we did overcome those challenges. And now I think we found a better way of working with the police, getting the information that we need, and as my colleagues have said, actually using the Trust and Confidence Plan and being able to look at the mechanisms, but then creating some metrics for ourselves and how we measure those. I'm a Southwark employee as well. I've worked for Southwark for many, many years, worked with many different communities. So it's within my soul and within my passion around the trust and confidence, and really being able to delve more into the actions and some of the headings and really understanding what does that actually mean. So going forward, I'm going to actually be going on one of the ride-along patrols next week. So that will be Yeah, that'll be interesting. Yeah, so I heed your notice about that, but I'm looking forward to that, and I definitely will be getting in contact with the police about some of the more engagement that they'll be doing, because I really want to understand. You know, there's historic issues. You know, the police do an amazing job, but there's a lot of historic issues, cultural issues, whatever there may be, and it's really about understanding where the community are coming from, and I want to go out into the community a lot more and do more of that this year. So yeah, that will be my main role this year. Thank you.
Super, thank you. Do you want to go over to Alice to talk about the transformation piece, or Councillor Ennin, did you want to come in before we do that?
I just wanted to point out that the Rosie Pack, if you look to the report, she's written a piece, as has Simon and Charlotte. They both send their apologies. Rosie's actually at the Faith conference today, addressing community safety and promoting the Policing Oversight Board. I think that it's really important that that piece of engagement continues, and it's something that each of the board members have made a commitment to actually go to the places where people are to make sure that we celebrate the board. One of the things I admitted from my initial intro was how do we ensure that residents actually inform the piece going forward, and what we had done at one of the initial first meeting was allow residents to select the thematic priorities, and that sort of feeds into what you were saying is what are the residents' priorities, and there's a piece of work that we would like to build into that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alice, can we test your audio? Are you with us in the room now? Can we hear you? If you keep talking, we'll see if we can adjust the audio. We can hear you better now, yes. Please go ahead.
Reached out to Councillor Ennin, as we were really interested to see like what the different dynamics were within different boroughs in London, and how these groups could potentially link in. Our groups would primarily look at policing powers and the use and discharge of that. So things like stop and search, maybe LFR, sort of strip searching. You could thematically look at stop and search as well. So for instance, if you're like, oh, I've heard you kind of talk about different areas, but like maybe an Elephant Castle, or like evening kind of nighttime economy venues, like what does the stop and search look like there? What times of day? How are they interacting with children? Kind of like overlapping with the priorities that you guys are kind of picking up. And especially, I think there's more overlap as well when you said you've tried to be like governed by those thematic areas that communities have come to you with. Like we can kind of try and identify sort of areas of overlap potentially with what then the community groups can look at and scrutinise, and they can kind of identify those trends. Yeah, so we're looking at kind of setting up similar community groups, and they should be rolling out kind of like over the next year. And hopefully it just kind of like will link quite well in together. There'll be a real focus on kind of training and making sure that these groups are able to scrutinise kind of police powers in the best way. So lots of kind of understanding about having those tricky conversations and what scrutiny looks like, and how you can sit in that kind of critical, uncomfortable space and be bringing like those different perspectives. Lots of like holistic training in terms of confidence, challenging, and then kind of the legality and kind of nuts and bolts of police powers. We're looking at kind of how we create like this model sort of independently, so these groups can kind of be self-functioning, to try to address some of those power imbalances as well that will really work and come up in these kind of scrutiny conversations. We're also going to be looking for kind of volunteers and doing like executive search for people that have like lived experience, that are really, really close to this and kind of really, really value that. As Councillor said, we're kind of really linked in, like it's modeled on the Hackney group, but then kind of that step further as we're kind of just piloting ideas there. So yeah, it was really lovely to hear all the work you guys are doing, and I think there's a huge link through. So yeah, really excited to kind of work with you guys going forward.
Brilliant. Thank you, Alice, and thank you everyone for that opener. I just wanted to start with, if you wouldn't mind, just a couple of questions. Oh, did you want to? Apologies, Caroline. Did you want to come in first?
Yeah, I suppose it's a couple of.
If you wouldn't mind popping your mic on, thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple of things, just from a kind of, I suppose, community safety team lens. Obviously, 12 months in, and obviously it's already been mentioned, some really good work across the board. I think there is absolutely some more work to be done around the visibility of the board and what that then means and how that translates to residents and their kind of key aspects around trust and confidence. I think in terms of governance, and I suppose the key question about so what, this work's happening, where is it having impacts, and how can how can we demonstrate that impact? I absolutely think that, and some of the conversations we're having at the moment, is how some of this work feeds directly into the work of the Community Safety Partnership, which is a statutory partnership, and trust and confidence is a kind of key priority within that governance framework. So again, just ensuring that this is not just the trust and confidence plan for the Met, but it's actually fed into those strategic and operational conversations of the partnership, really.
No, 100%, and I think it's worked quite well in Hackney so far, and like to the local authority were really like that absolute founding piece for it. Like no one knows your areas like you guys really. So pulling that through, like we want to model it. So yeah, 100%, keeping that eye on how it links into all these other systems.
Super. Thank you. Did you want to say anything, Jim?
So for my Southwark colleagues who've heard me talk a reasonable amount of time, one of my frustrations about a neighbourhood superintendent is I feel I have the same conversations as I had when I was a neighbourhood sergeant, a neighbourhood inspector and a neighbourhood chief inspector, let alone a superintendent. And the beauty of this is it's new, and I think you should really be applauded for stepping into the space. I don't know whether we beat Hackney, I don't know, but let's say it was an honourable draw. But to be involved in a level of scrutiny which has been, I think that we're all suitably friends enough now to say challenged at times. There have been some really challenging meetings, and to work our way through 4 or 5 meetings that we've had to the last one, which I personally felt was the most productive and the most polished, and we all walked away with a reasonably warm feeling around it from both perspectives. I think there's a lot of congratulations to be had there. It's certainly not a relationship where, as I say, it hasn't been particularly easy to work our way through it, but it is now at that stage where it is professionally uncomfortable, but in a good way. And I think it's been a real pleasure to be involved in it. I'm interested. Alice has probably briefed me up there more than I'd heard over the last couple of months. There are some conversations to work out where oversight and scrutiny fit together, and without seeing a future terms of reference and fully understanding in some more detail what the MOPAC product is, I kind of reserve my own judgment on that, because I just need to be able to visualise that, what the overlap is, whether one supersedes another, whether both run together, and I don't know, and I would just raise it to you, but I would reserve comment and judgment on as to how that looks. I'm looking to be properly informed with a terms of reference and a proper understanding around what the MOPAC direction truly is. Colleagues have talked to you about the trust and confidence plan. If I could reverse it back 14 months, I would have waited to have written the trust and confidence plan with the assistance of the board, and I would have had both of those products running together. One wasn't necessarily designed to work with the other one. They've kind of crossed over naturally. It is my intention to re-evaluate the plan with some of the assistance of the board. I was due to do that before Christmas, and for some personal reasons it didn't happen. But as soon as we can understand where we are with the MOPAC horizon, then we'll look to revisit that. But it's been a pleasure to be involved with it.
That's very positive to hear. Thank you. So just connecting to some of those points, so the report is a really great overview of what the Police Oversight Board's been doing, and I really like some of the lessons learnt that are called out in here, very frankly, and you've all talked about that journey, I think, that the board's been on in terms of forming those relationships and understanding the role and bedding that down. I just wanted to get a sense of how confident are you that actually those lessons learned are being addressed and that they will be addressed moving forward. I've heard some of the themes around, this is currently a 2-year pilot. We want to make sure it's extended. We want to make sure it's fully resourced to be able to do some of that. I'd be keen to get your thoughts on, do we feel like we've got everything we need here to make this a real success in the next year or so? And are those lessons learned going to be addressed or not?
I genuinely believe that the lessons learned will be embedded, but I do think there is a role with the board actually working alongside the police, and it's about understanding to what extent that trust and confidence plan is a living document. The board was never set up as a pilot, it was set up as a direct response to the Casey review, and the intention is that it continues and it grows in the same vein. One of the things that we're looking to is making sure that actual community members who may not come from a policy background, who may not be able to speak in the most articulate terms, can actually sit on that board. And we understand that there's a piece of training that would need to happen. I think that we need to get back to the heart of some of the substantive points that Councillor Foster initially raised. What would we do if a recommendation wasn't accepted? And in fact, we didn't find the need for that. What we found is with sufficient challenge and grip, and actually working alongside the Met, repeatedly reinforcing our points, we've got to a good middle ground. I think for next year, our key thing is about how do we resource the work that needs to happen, and making sure that police officers are not drawn away from crucial work that they're doing on the streets to actually carry out some of this work. Like I said to you at the start, this is in addition to their current work, so there isn't a dedicated person or team working on this. They're all doing this off the back of what they're already doing. It's in the same vein as the community safety team as well. So is there an opportunity for us to have a different setup that is still overseen somewhat by the council or the police, that is resourced independently? And it would be great to actually have an independent evaluation of our work. It would be great to see if MOPAC can be involved in that process. I mean, this is something that was sparked between the Central South BCU, the community safety team, and our local community members, and we're strong advocates for it to continue, and we want this work to be evaluated and for it to grow. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I open up to other questions? Councillor Bentley?
I mean, I think you've already kind of touched on it, but like you say, we are a massive and diverse borough, however we slice and dice that, and how, this board can really reach those people who, I think you mentioned kind of language barriers. I'm thinking particularly our Latin American community. How are those people really being kind of listened to, who, like you say, for whatever reason may have mistrust of the police and other kind of public bodies as well?
Those of you who know me know that I spend more time in community groups than I do shuffling papers, and it's really about engaging with communities. one of the things that we've done with when we did our first policing oversight board is actually members of the Latin American community did approach us, and this is something that we reflected on, and that's why we set that out in the report. So at each engagement event that I've gone to, I've taken the contact details of those groups, and we'll be reaching out to them using the contacts that we already have to engage. So we intend to continue that work. One of the things that we haven't been able to do is to actually get the report translated into Spanish, but it's something that we'll definitely take away and look at doing.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions? No? Okay. Thank you very much for coming to share some of the work of the board and where things will be going next. I'm hearing there are there are potential recommendations we might want to consider as a commission around making sure that there is some bolstered resource around this moving forward to ensure it succeeds, and thinking about how that can be made more long-lasting as well, beyond the current budgets that have been agreed. And also, not within the purview of this commission, but maybe a recommendation around independent evaluation, working with MOPAC on that as well, to really understand where we can improve and continue that, have a sort of culture of continuous improvement within the board as well, and making sure it's effective alongside whatever mechanism is set up by MOPAC around that as well, in the way that Alice spoke about earlier. Is there anything else that commission members would like to flag in terms of things we might want to recommend or cite post this item? No. Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Ennin, would you like to?
Yes, I just would like to ask the Commission if you've read the report and you feel that there's any feedback that you'd like to add to it, please let us know, because when we do the final draft, we would like to be able to take into consideration the recommendations of this Commission and any feedback before the final draft goes to report. So I would recommend that we send it back to you after your feedback, and then if you'd like to tweak it, then we'll publish it.
That would be great, thank you. Yes,
Thank you.
We can do that.
Okay, bye.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody. Okay. So we'll move on to our final few items then of the meeting. So the next item was just around the place space scrutiny review. Just wanted to cite that we've received some further evidence from Play England that will be circulated after the meeting. Play England was one of the organisations that we reached out to at the start of the Play Spaces review to ask for input, and they've shared a written report. We've not been able to align diaries in order for that representative to come along to one of our meetings, but that evidence will be able to be submitted into whatever our recommendations or final report looks like. And the final draft report will come to our next meeting, which is at the end of this month, for agreement, and we'll be working on that in the meantime as well. The next item then was around exploring the physical and mental health and wellbeing impacts of active travel and access to nature scrutiny, which was a review report that was produced by the Commission in the last municipal year, and we've got the Cabinet response, which is part of the pack here today. So the report's enclosed in the agenda for noting, but I wanted to check, do members want to make any comments on that? Not seeing any hands. Lovely, okay. Councillor Bentley.
I'm just looking at something here. There is this point, and I don't know if it's actually covered, around the cycle storage point. There are these, I think there's a move towards, somebody might need to help me out here with the language. The hangars, there's a move towards the hangars, but some estates still have lockers, which I understand are being phased out. But as I understand it, families can benefit much more from a cycle locker as opposed to a place in the hangar which can only have 6 bikes, and I think they're adult bikes or something like that. And that does seem to be a kind of contradiction in the kind of council's policy, where you do have these lockers on estates which are working really well but maybe need replacing or something like that, and people are saying, well, I'd like to keep this, and they're being told, no, you have to move to something, 5 minutes walk away, where there's a shortage. So I don't know if that's properly covered in this.
So I think we can note that. We don't have a sort of formal role to go back and challenge any of the responses from Cabinet, I believe. Julie, keep me right on that, but we can certainly note that as a question from the Commission.
You can't challenge, but you could ask some further clarification or some follow-up or something like that would be appropriate.
Yeah, I think this point has been a bit back and forth, so I just wanted to raise it.
Thank you. Any further comments, Councillor Neil?
If I could add to Councillor Bentley's remarks, that cyclists, perhaps some cyclists choose to use tricycles or are forced to use tricycles, and they will struggle with accommodating those tricycles in hangars or in lockers. So perhaps we could include that there's inclusion of groups of people that share a household and might want to go cycling at the same time, but also for various reasons don't use bicycles but will use tricycles because of their stability. Thank you.
We could certainly note that as well. Julie, did you want to come in?
Yeah, so you've got the annual interview with Councillor James McNash, and I believe he's got the portfolio for Streets for People, so that could be an opportunity to bring it up there.
Yes, that's a really good point. Just on that point, Councillor Neil, I'm aware there's also work going on in the Highways team around cargo bike hangars as well, which might link into the tricycles piece. So we could wrap that into the interview with the Cabinet member at the next meeting. Lovely, thank you. I had Councillor Parton first, sorry.
My only comment and real note was around the Green Active Troll item. I'm conscious that I wasn't actually part of the initial recommendations that went to Cabinet, and it was just more of a note that I see in the response that they talk about the ecology and tree planting officers and the kind of what is it, the borough urban, oh my god, what's the name of the role?
Urban forester?
The urban forester, that's it, yeah. And them being more involved in like streets for nature, greening schemes and kind of future highways projects. But it was just more of a note as to whether they really should be involved in all kind of highways projects going forward rather than just in kind of, I mean, there was a mention here for strategic biodiversity connectivity, but really maybe it's just a note that it should be all highways programs that they're working on, that these officers should be part of the programme.
Noted, thank you. Councillor Bentley, did you want to?
Yes, it was linking into the point around cargo bikes and specialist bikes being more of a target for theft. So I think if they're left outside and not, it's not like you can get a cargo bike in your flat. So yeah, just reiterating that point.
Yeah, we've got lots of ideas for our interview in the next meeting, I think. Councillor Neil.
I don't want to miss the opportunity to say out loud in Scrutiny that it's free to park a car, but it costs money to park a bicycle. And maybe we can note that and bring that up when we do our interview. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to the final item then around the work programme, which ties in nicely to what we were just talking about. So make sure I've got the right pack that I'm referring to. Our final meeting of the year is on the 23rd of February. And at the moment we have a number of items on the agenda. So the Climate Emergency Strategy and Action Plan update. There are then a grouping of items which would be taken together as part of the interview for of the Cabinet member for Clean Air, Streets and Waste. We have proposed here that we would also invite the Deputy Cabinet member for a cleaner borough and collectively request a number of reports around recycling and food recycling, council estate pilots, fly tipping and some of the enforcement activity there, and also off the back of the relatively recent cold snap of weather, just something around how the council manages its gritting activity when we do get very cold, icy weather, how the priority is managed around gritting roads versus gritting pavements, bearing in mind our focus on active travel. So a number of reports there that have been requested, but would then inform a broader interview with the cabinet member. We also have the place-based report, final report coming through as well. And then, Leo, at your request, there was the conversation around the use of the Thames and following the recent tideway developments. It'd be good just to flesh that out in terms of guests we might want to invite for that and the sorts of depth of conversation we might want to have. We've got one more meeting, and that's all for that meeting. So. Okay, lovely. Julie, any comments on that?
Yeah, just to say also, the tideway item is not going to be very long, so as any input you've got would be gratefully received so that we can get the right person as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you. Any comments on that, Councillor Parker?
My only comment on, I like the idea on the gritting and given the seasonality of the issue. My only question is, we also get a lot of inquiries from residents, for example, around leafing in the autumn, and these are kind of seasonal issues that come around. It's leaf fall in autumn, it's frost and ice in winter, and it's flooding and whenever there are heavy rainstorms. And I wonder if it's more of a please tell me if I'm speaking out of turn, but I wonder if it's more of a look at how the council responds to seasonal weather and conditions on the highway and how it affects the public.
I think that's a really good thought. Hopefully not too much for us to request an expansion of that, the remit of that report. Councillor Bentley.
In a rare moment of praise for this council, I do recall that in 2022 we had a very hot summer, and I did a walk around with the CEO, and all the leaves had fallen in August, and I remember her noting that. And then I do think things have got a little bit more agile, but I think often the problem is the sheer volume of London plane trees, the large leaves, all the rest of it, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, so it's always room for improvement. But I will say I think it is